And now to share my appreciation, I would like very much from the audience, a man.
Yeah, me.
A man that will dance with the girls.
Picture this. It's 1960 in Rome, and a beautiful blonde woman is standing barefoot in the street, holding a bow and arrow. She's wearing a black dress, and she's absolutely furious. Paparazzi are running in every direction, screaming, because she's not joking around. She actually shoots two of them with real arrows. One gets hit in the arm, another gets struck in the back. This isn't a movie scene. This is real life. And the woman with the bow and arrow is Anita Ekberg, one of the most stunning actresses who ever lived. But that wild night was just a tiny glimpse into a life that was far more complicated, more heartbreaking, and more shocking than anything you've ever heard. Today, we're going to talk about Anita Ekberg. The photos from her career show a woman who was absolutely gorgeous, confident, and glamorous. But what happened behind the cameras tells a completely different story. A story about a girl who escaped a strict religious home, only to find herself trapped in a different kind of prison. A story about fame that glittered on the outside, but felt empty on the inside. And a story about how Hollywood can lift you up to the stars and then drop you so hard you never fully recover. Get ready, because this journey is going to be emotional, shocking, and absolutely unforgettable. Anita Ekberg was born on September 29, 1931, in a city called Malmö in Sweden. She wasn't born into luxury or glamour. She was the sixth child in a family that had 8 kids total, all crammed into one house under one very strict roof. Her family was deeply religious, following Protestant rules that controlled everything. What she wore, how she spoke, what she dreamed about. It all had to fit within their narrow view of what was acceptable. Her father, Gustav, worked really hard. He had jobs as a warehouse boss and a harbor master, and Anita loved him deeply. But as she got older, she started feeling more and more distant from everyone else in her family, especially her mother. Her mother watched her constantly, always suspicious, always disapproving. When young Anita started dreaming about becoming a model, her mother treated it like she was planning to do something terrible and sinful. Can you imagine that? Being a teenager and wanting to pursue your dreams, but your own family tells you that your dreams are wrong? That kind of pressure builds up inside you. Every time Anita whispered about wanting to model, it felt like hitting a brick wall. She wanted freedom and movement. Her family wanted obedience and staying small. The tension in that house must have been suffocating. So as soon as Anita became a teenager, she made a decision that would change everything. She quit school and started taking modeling jobs. She was only 16 and 17 years old, but she was determined. Her family was horrified. They thought she was abandoning decency and throwing away her morals. But here's the thing. The more they disapproved, the more it pushed Anita forward. Modeling wasn't just about pretty pictures for her. It was the first time in her entire life that she felt seen instead of scolded. It was the first time she felt like she had control over her own choices. Every small paycheck she earned from modeling gave her a taste of independence she had never known inside that crowded, controlling house. Her parents kept making angry comments. They kept trying to shame her, but she ignored them and kept posing for cameras. This was her first real act of rebellion, and it carried her forward long before Hollywood even knew her name. She learned something important during those years. If she wanted to chase her dreams, she would have to step away from comfort and step away from the people who wanted to hold her back. Then something strange happened in 1950 when Anita was 19 years old. Her mother, the same woman who had been condemning modeling for years, suddenly encouraged her to enter the Miss Malmö beauty pageant. It was confusing. Why would her mother suddenly support something she had called improper? Maybe she saw an opportunity. Maybe she thought it would lead to a respectable marriage. Whatever the reason, Anita accepted, even though her emotions were mixed. And guess what? She won. She won Miss Malmö and then advanced to compete for Miss Sweden in 1951. When she won that national title representing her hometown, the prize was shockingly simple. She got 2 dresses and a trip to Atlantic City in America. That's it. No money, no car, no fancy rewards, just 2 dresses and a plane ticket. But those 2 dresses opened a door that would change her entire world. For the first time in her life, Anita Ekberg boarded a plane and left Sweden. She was heading to America for the Miss Universe contest, holding those two dresses like they were made of gold. Even though the prize looked modest, the shift it created in her life was enormous. She was finally escaping the restrictions she had grown up with. She was stepping into a world she had only dreamed about. When she arrived in Atlantic City for the 1951 Miss Universe pageant, Anita faced a huge problem. She barely spoke any English. She knew maybe 5 words total: yes, no, hamburger, a nightclub name, and ice cream. That was basically it. She would repeat these phrases over and over like they were lifelines, keeping her afloat in a foreign country. But here's the amazing part. Even though she couldn't speak the language, even though she couldn't answer simple questions, photographers absolutely swarmed her. There was something about her presence that was magnetic. A modeling agent named Eileen Ford saw something special in her and gave her advice. She told Anita to pout her lips like a fish, because that's what all the good models were doing. Anita learned fast. Soon, the cameras couldn't stop clicking whenever she was around. Even though Anita didn't win the Miss Universe crown, she became one of the 6 finalists. More importantly, she ended up featured in Life magazine, which was a huge deal back then. They called her the most photographed girl at the entire pageant. They praised her sunny face and her striking figure. Think about that. She stood there without being able to answer questions properly in English, yet somehow she became unforgettable to the American press. Her beauty and her presence spoke louder than words ever could. Universal Studios noticed her and signed her to a contract, the kind they typically gave to beauty pageant finalists. Anita arrived in Hollywood with no acting training and almost no English. The studio had big plans for her. They gave her a long list of things to learn: acting, speaking clearly, dancing, fencing, and horseback riding. But Anita had her own ideas. She ignored almost everything on that list, except for the horseback riding. She spent her days riding horses through the hills, skipping class after class, just enjoying herself. Later, she admitted she had been spoiled. Her early paychecks went straight to indulgences. She bought herself a mink fur stole and a white Jaguar sports car. She drove around the city smiling and laughing, living the glamorous life she had always imagined. But there was someone watching her who wanted to control her. Howard Hughes, the famous billionaire and movie producer, became obsessed with her. He wanted to change her face and her name. He thought he could mold her into his perfect vision. But Anita refused every single suggestion. She believed that if she succeeded, the name Ekberg would matter, and if she didn't succeed, then nothing would matter anyway. She held her ground even when powerful people tried to push her around. But Universal Studios was not happy. They expected their contract players to work hard, learn their craft, and become polished professionals. Instead, they found an actress who was completely uninterested in training. After just 6 months, the studio dropped her from her contract. It shocked everyone, because she had the kind of looks that Hollywood normally turned into gold. But beauty alone wasn't enough. Without discipline and dedication, all those good looks meant nothing. Anita ended up taking tiny roles in forgettable movies. She played a guard in a silly comedy called Abbott and Costello Go to Mars in 1953. It should have been humiliating, but she barely noticed because she still believed the spotlight would find her eventually. Actor John Wayne gave her a new contract at $75 a week, and she accepted because she needed any foothold she could get. The rejection from Universal hurt, but it didn't soften her attitude. She just kept moving forward, the same way she had walked away from her parents' rules back in Sweden. Her attitude earned her a nickname in Hollywood that stuck for years. The press started calling her Anita Ekberg because they thought she was cold and distant. Reporters found her aloof. Other performers thought she was arrogant. There was even a nightclub singer who became convinced that Anita had insulted her figure, and she retaliated by throwing tomatoes at Anita during a performance. The scandal made it into gossip columns and made Anita seem unreachable and unfriendly. The truth is, Anita never tried to charm the journalists. She refused to play the game of being sweet and accommodating. In an industry where keeping a smile on your face could keep your career alive, she refused to fake it. Every cold glance turned into another headline calling her unapproachable. The nickname Iceberg stuck. Even so, she carried herself as if she didn't need the press, although their resentment followed her everywhere she went. Then something changed her fortunes again in 1950 when Bob Hope was organizing a tour to Greenland to entertain American soldiers stationed there and brought Anita along. Cameras captured her standing beside him in the Arctic cold, and he praised her beauty in front of thousands of servicemen. The coverage absolutely exploded. Newspapers rushed to write stories about her. This attention was bigger than anything her small movie roles had ever generated. Suddenly, she wasn't a forgotten contract player anymore. She was the beautiful blonde who brightened the frozen Arctic for troops far from home. This was the first televised USO event, and Anita's presence became the main story. That spotlight pulled her deeper into Hollywood's view and opened doors that had been closed before. John Wayne noticed how audiences responded to her and gave her a real speaking role in a movie called Blood Alley in 1955. The role was awkward because she had to play a character that didn't look anything like her. They dyed her hair, hid her figure, and completely reshaped how she appeared. But it was important because it finally let her voice be heard in a film instead of leaving her silent in the background. Howard Hughes, even though their romance had ended, helped her get a part in a thriller called Back from Eternity in 1956. This film helped build her resume in a way Universal never had. Then came the big one. Paramount Studios borrowed her for War and Peace, a massive film shot in Rome with stars like Audrey Hepburn and Henry Fonda. Anita played a seductive character meant to contrast with Hepburn's innocence. Her heavy Swedish accent meant they had to dub her voice, but her physical presence left an impression around the world. The film came out in August 1956 and got multiple Academy Award nominations. This role helped cement her as an international figure. Paramount decided to market her as their answer to Marilyn Monroe. They highlighted her measurements and her height, calling her Paramount's Marilyn Monroe. A director joked that her curves broke the laws of gravity and said her appeal came from the immaturity of American men. The studio put her in 5 films in 1956, pairing her with big stars like Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. This flood of publicity brought her massive fame, but it also trapped her. She became typecast as the sex symbol, the blonde bombshell. She later said that every director wanted her to repeat the same character again and again, giving her no room to grow or show what else she could do. Her fame mixed with scandal, especially through her affair with actor Tyrone Power. It started around 1953 while he was married to another actress named Linda Christian. Anita visited Power on movie sets and even met his family. The affair lasted several years and played a role in destroying his marriage. She moved through Hollywood romances quickly, dating Frank Sinatra in 1955 and attracting attention from other famous actors. Her relationship with actor Rod Taylor became a storm of passion and public arguments that drew paparazzi to every corner of their lives. Her figure and her love life kept her in magazines constantly. Here's something shocking. Anita later admitted that many of her biggest scandals were actually planned. In one incident, at a hotel in London, her dress burst open in front of photographers, looking like a wardrobe accident. She later revealed it had been staged to sell pictures and keep her name in the papers. She understood how attention worked better than most actresses of her era, and she knew how to manipulate it. She played the publicity game before it became expected. But her most secret relationship was with a man named Gianni Agnelli, the billionaire owner of Fiat, the car company. He was married to a princess, which meant Anita could never be more than a hidden lover. They met in hotels, and eventually he rented her a villa in Rome so they could meet more freely. Photographers who managed to catch them together had their images shut down by his powerful lawyers. One night, he arrived at the villa unexpectedly and found her with another man, an actor she would later marry. That moment destroyed their secret world. On May 22, 1956, Anita married a British actor named Anthony Steele in Florence, Italy. From the very first moment, the marriage felt like too much. The ceremony took place at the city's town hall, but it wasn't intimate or calm. Crowds flooded the square outside, pressing in so tightly that police had to keep order. Photographers climbed over statues and shouted for attention, desperate to get the perfect shot. The wedding turned into chaos. Reporters compared it to a traveling circus. Anita and Anthony were pushed to pose over and over, changing outfits multiple times, smiling until their faces hurt. Even before the day was over, Steele looked exhausted. He told reporters he was glad it had ended.
On what should have been the happiest day of his life, the fatigue already showed cracks that would only grow bigger. After the wedding, Anthony Steele made a decision driven by love and pride, but it cost him everything. At the time, his career in Britain was strong. He was earning good money and was one of the biggest stars at his studio. He still had 3 years left on his contract. But he walked away from it all to follow Anita to Hollywood. The decision shocked everyone. Powerful producers felt betrayed. In Hollywood, Steele found himself with nothing to do, watching his reputation fade away. He later admitted that a man needs work to keep his self-respect, and not having it slowly aided him. As Anita's fame grew bigger and bigger, Steele's insecurity turned into jealousy. He loved her deeply, but being married to one of the most desired women in the world tormented him. Men flirted with her openly wherever they went, and Steele reacted with his fists instead of staying calm. He fought with photographers, punched strangers, and caused scenes that followed them everywhere. These violent outbursts became part of the growing paparazzi culture in Rome. But the violence didn't stop in public. Witnesses reported seeing physical fights between the couple, and Anita later confirmed that he hit her. Alcohol made everything worse. Steele was arrested twice for drunk driving, including one high-speed incident shortly after their wedding. Anita had to rush in and bail him out while reporters waited eagerly outside. Years later, Anita revealed just how early the nightmare began. In an interview from the year 2000, she described their third night as husband and wife. She came home and found Steele completely drunk, swinging from the ceiling lights, out of control and raging. He would disappear many nights and return the next morning without any explanation. His behavior terrified her. Heavy drinking was common among actors back then, but Steele's addiction controlled him completely. Combined with jealousy, violence, and career frustration, it poisoned every corner of their home. There was no room for peace. When they divorced in 1959, after only 3 years of marriage, the damage went beyond emotional scars. During the marriage, Steele had borrowed $100,000 from Anita, which was an enormous amount of money back then. He never paid it back. That betrayal haunted her later in life when she desperately needed money and had none. Around the same time her marriage was falling apart, fate pulled Anita into a role that would define her forever. In 1959, an Italian film director named Federico Fellini saw her near the Spanish Steps in Rome. His reaction was instant and overwhelming. He described feeling hypnotized, as if he was witnessing something beyond normal human scale. He spoke about her in intense terms, comparing her to powerful animals and natural forces. To him, her presence wasn't just beauty, it was something elemental, something almost magical. That vision came alive during the filming of La Dolce Vita, which means The Sweet Life. There's a scene in that movie that became one of the most famous scenes in all of cinema history. It takes place at the Trevi Fountain in Rome. The scene was shot over an entire week in March 1959 during freezing cold nights. Anita stood for hours in icy cold water wearing only a strapless black evening gown. She didn't complain. Fellini later said she stepped into that fountain without any hesitation. Her co-star, Marcello Mastroianni, struggled far more than she did. Even though he was wearing a wetsuit under his clothes, he drank an entire bottle of vodka just to cope with the cold, and he could barely stand by the end. Anita later said she was freezing and had to be lifted out of the water because she couldn't feel her legs anymore. Despite her incredible strength and endurance, she faced cruelty on the set. Mastroianni mocked her with harsh comparisons meant to strip away her glamour. Other people on set reduced her to crude labels, even while admitting she endured conditions that defeated everyone else. These comments revealed the awful tension of that time, where her body was admired, exploited, and ridiculed all at once. When La Dolce Vita premiered in 1960, outrage erupted everywhere. The Vatican, the center of the Catholic Church, condemned the film as immoral. They focused directly on Anita's appearance and how much of her cleavage was visible. Their criticism turned the film into a global scandal. Some countries actually banned it from being shown. Ironically, all that condemnation only made the film more famous. Instead of backing down or staying quiet, Anita fought back. She publicly said she was proud of her body and glad to show it. She called it womanliness, not something to be ashamed of. In an era when actresses were expected to stay silent and accept criticism, her words landed like a challenge. She became more than just a movie star. She became a symbol of defiance and confidence. That defiance exploded again later in 1960 on a night in Rome that became legendary. On October 19th, paparazzi photographed her kissing a married movie producer at a nightclub. They followed her through the streets and all the way back to her villa. As they prepared to leave, thinking they'd gotten their shots, Anita burst outside. She was barefoot, wearing a black dress, and she was holding a bow and arrow. She had been training for a warrior role in a movie and knew exactly how to use that weapon.
She shouted at them to give her the photos. When they refused, she released the arrows. One struck a photographer in the arm. Another hit a second man in the back. When one of them tried to stop her, she attacked him with her fists. This wasn't a publicity stunt. This was real rage from a woman who was tired of being hunted like an animal. The paparazzi had invaded her privacy one too many times, and she snapped. After La Dolce Vita came out, everything in Anita's life quietly shifted. Even though it looked like massive success from the outside, the film actually became a trap. It turned her into a global sensation, but it also locked her inside a single image she could never escape. She later admitted that life became boring after that film because every producer and director wanted the same thing from her over and over again. They all wanted the mysterious American woman who arrives in Italy. They all wanted another Trevi Fountain moment. That one scene with her stepping into the water in a black evening gown became unforgettable, but it also became a cage. Executives stopped seeing her as an actress with range and depth. They only saw that one moment, that one image. Every script they sent her asked her to repeat that dream version of herself. What should have opened doors for her career slowly closed them instead. The masterpiece that defined a generation also quietly limited her for decades to come. As the years passed, Hollywood made its thinking painfully clear. In 1963, she appeared in a Western comedy called Four for Texas with Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and Ursula Andress. On paper, it looked like a strong comeback. In reality, it showed how far she had fallen in the eyes of critics. Reviews focused less on her acting and more on her body. One critic wrote about how she towered over Sinatra and described her gowns instead of her performance. Another dismissed her entirely by saying she was all chest and little else. Meanwhile, Ursula Andress, who was also famous for her beauty, was praised for having depth and strength in her role. The contrast was cruel. Both women were known for being gorgeous, yet only Anita was reduced to her measurements. In one stroke, American cinema stripped her of any credibility as a serious actress. From there, the decline became harder and harder to stop. Through the 1960s and 1970s, the prestigious European films faded away. They were replaced by obscure and exploitative projects that used her name to sell tickets but gave her nothing good to work with. Her American career dried up completely, forcing her to work almost entirely in Europe. She appeared in cheap thriller films that critics described as forgettable. Then came a shocking role in 1979 in a movie called Killer Nun, where she played a morphine-addicted nun driven to violence. The woman who once stood at the center of artistic cinema was now being pulled into projects that offered no dignity and no future. Even as meaningful roles disappeared, the exploitation never stopped. In 1972, she was forced to take legal action against an Italian magazine that published nude photographs of her without her permission. The lawsuit exposed a harsh truth. While the industry no longer wanted her on screen, it still believed it owned her image. Her body was treated as public property, something to be photographed and sold without her consent. The case showed how actresses whose fame was built on beauty were left completely exposed once their careers slowed down. Her personal life offered no safety either. On April 9, 1963, she married a man named Rick Van Nutter, a former CIA agent who played a character in a James Bond film. She hoped this second marriage would bring stability after her divorce from Anthony Steele. Instead, it ended in complete disaster. When they divorced in 1975, after 12 years together, Anita claimed that Van Nutter had taken everything from her. She said he emptied her bank accounts, sold her villa and all its contents without telling her, and disappeared with her Ferrari, her yacht, and other valuable possessions. The betrayal crushed her emotionally and financially. Whatever little security she had left was gone, leaving her vulnerable at the exact moment when her career had already collapsed. Time moved on, and the world that once adored her grew distant.
Federico Fellini brought her back briefly in 1987, 27 years after La Dolce Vita. He reunited her with Marcello Mastroianni in a film called Intervista. In one deeply emotional scene, they watched their famous fountain moment projected on a screen. Tears rolled down Anita's face as time confronted her all at once. They recreated the scene, but only as shadows accompanied by music. It was beautiful and heartbreaking. She was no longer leading the story, she had become a symbol of what cinema used to be. After more than 50 years and over 50 films, her career ended quietly. In 2002, she officially retired after appearing in a tiny television production. There were no awards, no celebrations, no grand farewell. The silence was heavy. The actress who once defined glamour faded away without recognition, working her final years in minor productions as the industry moved on without her. Then, life turned cruel in ways that felt almost unbearable. In December 2011, when she was 80 years old, she broke her thigh after being knocked down by one of her beloved Great Dane dogs. She spent 3 months in the hospital. While she lay there, unable to move or protect herself, thieves broke into her villa and stole her jewelry and furniture. The robbery went unnoticed for some time because she was still hospitalized. Reports revealed she was already struggling financially before this happened. After the theft, she was described as nearly destitute. Her accountant had to publicly ask for help, exposing just how far her fortunes had fallen. As she tried to recover, another blow arrived. Her villa was damaged by a fire. Repairs were impossible without money she didn't have. In desperation, she applied for help from the Fellini Foundation, the very organization tied to the director whose film made her immortal. The irony was sharp and painful. The foundation itself was struggling financially and could offer little support. The woman who helped make Fellini famous was left waiting, uncertain if any help would come at all. Her final years were spent in a wheelchair at a senior living facility near Rome. The former Miss Sweden contestant, once known for her towering beauty and graceful movement, now depended on others for daily care. Her lawyer revealed she survived on a very small pension. When she died on January 11, 2015 at age 83, it was said she didn't die in poverty only because she technically still owned the damaged villa. It was a hollow detail. She couldn't live there, she couldn't afford to fix it. She lived simply, quietly, and far from any luxury. Her death passed with little attention. Obituaries focused almost entirely on the Trevi Fountain scene, reducing a 50-year career to a single moment. There were no major tributes, no grand retrospectives. The industry that once chased her image moved on without looking back. Meanwhile, the fountain she made famous continued to generate millions of dollars through tourism and fashion. In 2015, the Fendi fashion house donated $4 million to restore it. In 2016, models walked across it on glass platforms, recreating her iconic moment. Tourists continue to wade into that water every single day, chasing her shadow, trying to capture a piece of that magic. Anita Ekberg received nothing from any of it. No payments, no royalties, no recognition. She once said she could no longer stand watching that scene because she had seen it too many times. It had become a beautiful prison. In the end, her ashes were sent back to Sweden, the country she had left so many decades before. The woman who symbolized excess, beauty, and freedom died quietly, nearly forgotten by the industry she had given everything to. So, what do we learn from Anita Ekberg's story? Her life revealed the dark truth behind glamour and fame. She showed us that fame without protection fades incredibly fast. Beauty without respect becomes a trap that's almost impossible to escape. Success that's built only on how you look can crumble the moment you age or the moment the industry decides it's done with you. Anita gave the world an image it will never forget. That moment in the Trevi Fountain, with her black dress and her radiant smile, became one of the most iconic images in cinema history. Millions of people have been inspired by it. Millions of tourists have tried to recreate it. Fashion designers still reference it. It's been nearly 70 years, and that image still has power. But what did the world give her back? Almost nothing. Not when it mattered most. Not when she was old and injured and alone. Not when thieves were stealing from her home. Not when she was applying for charity just to survive. The same industry that made billions from her image left her with almost nothing at the end. This story makes you think about all the other actresses, all the other beautiful women who were used up and discarded. How many of them ended their lives in similar ways, forgotten and struggling? How many of them gave everything to an industry that gave nothing back? Anita Ekberg's life was extraordinary. She escaped a controlling religious household, she conquered beauty pageants, she became an international star, she stood up to the Vatican, she literally shot paparazzi with arrows when they invaded her privacy. She worked with legendary directors and appeared in over 50 films. She became an icon. But she also suffered betrayals from 2 husbands who took her money. She was typecast and couldn't escape one role. She watched her career crumble. She faced financial ruin. She died nearly alone, far from the spotlight that once followed her everywhere. The photos from her prime show a woman who was absolutely stunning, confident, and larger than life. They show someone who left little to the imagination and wasn't afraid to own her beauty and her body. But behind those photos was a real person with real pain, real struggles, and real loneliness. If Anita's story moved you, if it made you think, if it broke your heart even a little bit, then please hit that like button right now. Share